So let's talk about the types of money that are available to a startup technology venture. Usually when somebody is beginning their first venture, they think, oh, I'm going to need a lot of money, so therefore I'm going to need venture capital. And that might be the case. But actually, only a very small percentage of businesses do get venture capital. So let's talk about the different kinds of money that you might want to think about. Some of them may lead to venture capital, but some of them may lead in other directions. So first of all, if you're a student in the university, you're already supported by a form of money because you are in the university, you're using the resources of the university. And if you are a graduate student, you're actually probably you are almost certainly an employee of the university. So you are actually using the university's resources and inventing, in fact, for the university. So one of the challenges you've got to overcome is you have to create a technology license with the university. But that's a separate subject. The key point is you're developing resources, you're developing technology using the resources of the university, or using the resources of the federal government, and or using other resources that come into the university to create your technology. That is very good. It's very good to be able to make use of those resources because they are free in a sense. They are free in terms of the stock in your company. Whatever company you are going to create, no matter how many resources are going into it from grant funding, which is the money from the university that comes in from the federal government, or resources that are within the university, that's sort of free money. So you can use as much of that as you want, and it's not going to affect the stock within your company. So that's good. You want to be able, ideally, to make use of that sort of grant money. So that's one piece, grant money. Second piece of money is equity. So what that means is that somebody is going to buy a stake in your company. Let's fast forward a bit. Let's assume that you've figured out at least how to create a company. You have a company. In some way that company has technology within it. You're a member of that company. You've gotten technology into that company. Now you want to sell a piece of that company to an investor so that they then own a piece of your company and you have the cash that they provided. So first of all, it's grant money. Second of all, it's equity money. When you're trying to get equity into a company, again, you usually think about venture capital. But probably prior to venture capital, you're talking to what are called angel investors. Angel investors are individuals who probably have been successful in their own careers and are now starting to invest in companies. But even before that, you may be selling a piece of the company to friends and family. That's actually where people usually start. So usually when they incorporate a company, they get some small amount of money from their own pockets, their spouses' pockets, their friends' pockets, their relatives' pockets. That's friends and family money. That's often the first money that starts the company. Those people are also angels, so that they're usually called friends and family. The next level up are these angel investors, who are individual investors who are buying a piece of your company. And then once they put in money, once you've hit certain milestones, you might get to the point where venture capital investors invest. Venture capitalists are sort of like mutual funds, in that, like a mutual fund, it's a company that owns a bunch of other companies. So a mutual fund, as you probably are more familiar with, it's an entity that has purchased stock in different public companies. They might hold stock in Apple, they might hold stock in IBM, they might hold stock in Dow Chemicals. And you, if you own a piece of that mutual fund company, therefore also own a piece in what they own. Venture capital works the same way. Investors invest in a company called a venture capital company, and that company then goes out, that venture capital company goes out and purchases pieces of private companies. One of them might be your company. Venture capital is a group of managers who are managing a pool of capital to invest in private companies. That's the equity stack, as it's called. It starts with friends and family, it goes on to angel capital, and then it ends up with venture capital. First of all, some people say, well, can't I just go to a bank and borrow money? And for a technology company, a technology startup, banks aren't an option. Banks are typically lending to larger, older, established businesses, and they're typically lending against some form of asset, typically, although not always a hard asset. So typically banks are lending, for example, to a manufacturing company in order for them to buy equipment or to buy a building. So banks are pretty much off the table. But there's another tremendous source in the United States for capital for a startup technology business, and that is called SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research Grants. It's really the largest source of seed capital, of startup capital for technology businesses in the United States. It's provided by the federal government, and it's provided through different agencies within the federal government like NIH or NSF, the National Science Foundation, or other agencies that have an SBIR program within them and give grants to startup businesses to help commercialize their technology. There's another variant of this program which is called STTR, which is a type of SBIR grant that is in association with the university. An SBIR grant is a company can apply for an SBIR grant. An STTR grant is intended so that a company in partnership with the university can apply for the grant, and some of the money goes to the university and some of it goes to the company. But they're all broadly grouped under the category of SBIR grant funding. So if you're a technology venture, that is definitely a place to start to get a first phase SBIR grant of around $100,000. So one of the challenges with raising equity capital, with getting people to purchase some of your company in exchange for the cash that they provide to you, is that then they own part of the company, and then in a sense they own part of your life and your future. And what they're doing, they're buying part of your company so that they can get the appreciation of the value that is represented by their stock, just like when a public company goes up in its stock price goes up, they're hoping that your stock price goes up. But because this isn't in the public market, you can't go look up the price of your stock online or in the Wall Street Journal like you can with a public company. The question is, how are they going to get their money out? They can't just sell it to other investors easily. So there are two ways they get their money out. One is the company gets sold. So you've grown the company for a while, and at some point, some bigger company comes along and says, I want you. And they buy your company. Now, if you don't want to sell your company, your investors are probably going to be rather upset, especially if the big company is wanting to pay a lot of money for your company. And you're going to get a lot of pressure to sell the company, because that's why the investors put in the money in the first place. They wanted to put in X and get 2x, 3x, 10x their money out when you've built value and then are able to sell the company. So if you take equity from an investor, you are probably going to sell your company, they hope, sooner rather than later. So there are other ways, though, of getting high-risk capital and not giving up as much control. The primary alternative to getting equity capital is to getting some form of what's called royalty capital. What that means is that instead of giving up a piece of your company to investors, you're giving up a piece of your revenue stream to investors. So they are buying a percentage of your sales. And so if you do really well, they do really well, because you have high sales. They have a percentage of those sales, so the more sales you have, the better they do. And there are all sorts of variations on this royalty capital, which I won't go on into, or on revenue sharing, which is what this is. But the main point is, it's a different way of funding your company. Now, the downside of doing this is that often with a technology company, it's very hard to know when you are going to be generating revenue, and it's very hard to project how much revenue you're going to be generating, and therefore it's very hard to tell investors what their returns might be. Also, with a technology company, a lot of the appreciation in value may not come from revenue, but may come from the value of the technology that you're developing. The challenge with royalty capital is that it's not always applicable. In fact, it often isn't the right sort of capital for a technology-based venture, but it might be. And it's these sort of questions that advisors, like the advisors with the organization that I work with, VentureWell, are there to help you figure out. There to help you figure out what is the right match between capital on the one hand and you and your aspirations on the other hand, and also between capital and the type of technology that you've got and the trajectory of that technology into the marketplace.